I never thought the two people I carried in my womb, fed with my hands, and prayed for every night would one day leave me for dead. My own son and daughter. The very ones I sacrificed my youth for. They drove away and never looked back while I lay helpless on the side of the road in Savannah, Georgia. But what they didn't know was that the bank, the business, and the very roof over their heads still carried my name, and my signature was the only one that mattered. And when the time came, I used that signature not for revenge but for justice. Get ready, because what you're about to hear is not just a story. It's the truth of a mother's reckoning. Comment below where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this. My name is Etta Mae Coleman and I am 68 years old. I've lived my whole life here in Savannah, Georgia, under the shade of moss-draped oak trees that look like they've been watching families rise and fall for centuries. Sometimes I think those trees hold more secrets than the people who walk beneath them. When I speak my name, it feels heavy because it's not just mine. It carries the history of my late husband, Thomas Coleman, and the little legacy we built together with our bare hands. But my name also carries the sting of betrayal, because the two people who should have carried it forward, my children, chose instead to break me. My son, Marcus, was always the louder one, the kind who liked to fill a room with his voice, even when his words carried no weight. My daughter, Lila, had a softer way about her, but her silence was just as sharp as his shouting. And together they did something I never imagined flesh of my flesh could do. They abandoned me. Yes, my own children, the very ones I sacrificed my health, my sleep, my dreams for, turned their backs on me in the cruelest way. You know, people talk about enemies and rivals, but let me tell you this. A wound from a stranger may bruise your skin, but a wound from your children? That pierces your soul. I can still hear Marcus's voice the night it happened, echoing like a storm rolling off the coast. "Mama, you don't know how to run things anymore. You're holding us back." And Lila, standing there with her arms crossed, eyes cold, whispering, "Maybe it's time you step aside." Step aside. That's what they called it. But in truth, it wasn't stepping aside. It was them pushing me out, shoving me toward the edge of my own life, as if I was just a piece of furniture they'd grown tired of. You see, we had a business. Not a big fancy one, but one built from sweat and prayers. Coleman Coastal Linen, a small laundry and linen service tucked right near the river. Thomas and I started it when we were young and dreaming, back when our hands could still work long nights without trembling. That shop was our lifeline, our pride. Kept clothes fresh for hotels, restaurants, weddings, you name it. And after Thomas passed, I kept it running because I thought that's what a mother does. She carries the weight until her children are ready. But instead of gratitude, I was met with greed. Marcus saw the numbers, the accounts, and thought of how he could spend them. Lila saw the image, the name, and thought of how she could rebrand it. They wanted the fruits without remembering the roots. Me, I was in the way. I can't tell you how it feels to sit across from your own children and realize you are no longer mother, no longer guide, no longer beloved. You're an obstacle. A wall they want to tear down. It's a pain that doesn't leave you. Even now as I speak, it burns behind my chest like a coal that won't cool. But I need you to understand me, friend. I am not some pitiful old woman who sat back and let herself be tossed aside. But I am Etta Mae Coleman. I have lived 6 decades in Savannah, and I have weathered storms both in the sky and in my spirit. The night my children left me for dead on Victory Drive, they thought it was the end of me. They thought they had rid themselves of a burden. What they didn't know, what they could not have imagined, was that I still held something they needed more than they needed me. I still held a name that meant something in this city. And I still held a signature that could stop them in their tracks. But I won't rush ahead. You need to hear it the way it unfolded, piece by piece, heartbreak by heartbreak, until we reach the moment where the scales turned. Because betrayal isn't just one moment. It's a thread that unravels, slowly, until the whole cloth of family is torn. So I'll begin at the beginning as an old mother telling her truth. My name is Etta Mae Coleman. I'm 68 years old. And this is how my own children tried to erase me. And how fate gave me the pen to write my ending. Before everything crumbled, my life had a steady rhythm like the tide rolling in and out along the Savannah River. I woke before dawn, brewed my chicory coffee and walked out to the porch where the air smelled of salt and magnolia. At 68, my knees weren't what they used to be, but I still found strength in routine. That's what kept me going after Thomas passed. Thomas and I had built Coleman Coastal Linen from nothing. We started with one washing machine in a shed, scrubbing until our fingers bled, and slowly grew it into a service trusted by half the hotels in the historic district. He used to say, "Etta, if you keep linens fresh, you keep reputations fresh." Folks remember that. He was right. The business became more than work. It was our name, our story, our way of standing tall. After he died, I told myself I'd keep it alive until Marcus and Lila were ready to carry it forward. I thought the work would teach them patience, respect, humility. I thought that's what parents were supposed to do. Plant seeds in their children so they could grow into something stronger. Marcus, he was always restless. He wanted quick results, the kind you see on television or in other people's pockets. He'd stroll into the shop, bark orders at the workers, then disappear when the machines groaned or the deliveries fell behind. Lila, on the other hand, had a gentler voice, but she carried a quiet entitlement. She liked to talk about branding, about making us look modern, as if her father's sweat-stained shirts and my tired hands were an embarrassment. So I believed in them. I excused Marcus's arrogance as youth. I mistook Lila's detachment for ambition. When they spoke of changing things, I told myself it was a good sign. They cared enough to dream. Looking back now, I see the cracks. I see how Marcus rolled his eyes when I balanced the books with my pen instead of a tablet. I hear Lila's sighs when I insisted we keep our oldest clients on discounted contracts, because they stood by us when no one else did. To them, tradition wasn't heritage, it was dead weight. But in those days, I didn't let myself see the truth. I told myself, they're my children, they'll come around. I even let them step into small roles. Marcus handled supplier calls. Lila managed a social page online. I thought giving them responsibility would make them respect what we'd built. There were good days too. I'd sit with my grandchildren. Yes, even now they're innocent in all this, and teach them how to fold napkins into swans. I'd cook collard greens and cornbread for Sunday dinners, and for a moment, it felt like family still meant something. But those dinners grew quieter over time. Marcus leaving early with excuses, Lila staring at her phone. And still I told myself, family bends, it doesn't break. Oh, how wrong I was. Because beneath the surface, a storm was brewing. The children I raised were no longer looking at me as their mother. They were looking at me as a problem. An obstacle between them and what they thought was theirs. At 68, I still clung to the hope that my love was enough to anchor them. But love, I've learned, doesn't always protect you from betrayal. Sometimes, it blinds you to it. The linen shop smelled of soap and starch. The machines rattled like old bones, and the workers trusted me because I was steady. Yet in the very same space, my own son and daughter were plotting how to push me aside. And the cruelest part? I didn't see it. Not until the night they left me on Victory Drive. But that night was coming. I could feel it in the way Marcus's voice sharpened when he said I was stuck in the past. I could feel it in Lila's silence, the kind that isn't agreement, it's judgment. The tide was shifting and I didn't even know I was standing in its path. I remember the sky first. It was the kind of Savannah evening where the clouds hang low and heavy, like they're eavesdropping. The air stuck to my skin, warm and damp, and the streetlights along Victory Drive made long pale rivers on the asphalt. I had asked Marcus and Lila to come by the house after closing so we could talk, just talk like a family that still knew how. They insisted we ride and clear the air. I should have trusted my porch and my own four walls, but I wanted peace so bad I followed them to the car without my sweater. Marcus drove. Lila sat in the front, her face lit by the dashboard, chin lifted like she'd already decided the verdict. I sat in the back with my purse tucked close, the strap warm under my palm. The smell of the car freshener was sharp, something like fake pine, and underneath it a faint hint of detergent from the shop. We had barely turned onto Victory before the talking started. Wasn't talking really. It was two currents wearing me down. Mama, you're not listening, Marcus said, hands tight on the wheel. We can sell now while the brand still means something. Take the money. Move you into a condo by the river. We handle the rest. Lila's voice slid between his words. It's time to be realistic. You can't run deliveries anymore. You can't fix the machines. The clients expect new. We are offering you dignity. Dignity. That word poked me like a pin. I asked them, simple and plain, who fed you when we had only beans and rice? Who kept the lights on when your father was in the hospital? Who washed sheets in winter with the door cracked because the dryer ran hot and we couldn't afford repairs? That was dignity, baby. Working. Not quitting. Marcus laughed without humor. Nostalgia doesn't pay payroll, Mama. Investors do. He glanced at Lila. Tell her. Lila didn't look back at me. We already have interest. But they want clear ownership. No complications. I felt my chest grow tight, a kind of pressure like a hand against my sternum. Complications, I repeated. Is that what I am to you? A complication. Silence filled the car like fog. We passed the old live oaks, their branches reaching over the road. I pictured my husband's hands on those washing machines, the way he used to tap a wrench against the lid and listen like the machine was telling a secret. I could still feel his presence in the shop, not as a ghost, but as a promise we'd made to our younger selves. We're doing this for you, Marcus said. You'll be comfortable. I am comfortable in my purpose, I said. In my place. The pressure inside my chest shifted to a faint flutter. I pressed my palm there. I've had flutters before, old woman things, but this one felt odd, like a bird trapped under ribs. Marcus took the curve a little fast. Lila reached for the dashboard, steadying herself, then spoke without turning around. Mama, you're being stubborn. We changed the locks because you refused to stop interfering. Clients get nervous when they see chaos. Chaos, I said softly. Is that what you call your mother doing her job? The bird fluttered again. I tasted metal copper on my tongue. I swallowed and felt sweat bead along my hairline. I told myself it was the heat, the stress, not anything serious. The last time I visited the clinic, they said my blood pressure was respectable for your age. Respectable. Another one of those words. Marcus pulled over near a stretch where the streetlights spaced out, leaving a pocket of dark between them. He shifted into park and twisted in his seat, eyes bright with the kind of fire that burns first and thinks later. We need your consent, Mama. We need you to sign things clean. No liens. No old promises to old customers. I took a breath. The air felt too thick suddenly. The old customers kept us alive, I said. We don't cast away the hands that held us when we were small. He slapped the steering wheel. This is business, not church. Lila finally looked at me. Her face was careful, like she'd practiced how to hold it. Sign over control, Mama. You'll still be part of the story. You'll be the founder. We'll put your picture on the website. She said it like a prize. I thought of my husband's photo in the office. The frame crooked because he used to bump it with his shoulder. I thought of the girls on the folding line who always brought me sweet tea without asking. I thought of the thin envelope tucked in my purse, the one from Coastal First Bank I hadn't opened yet because I wanted to read it in peace, not with my heart beating like a drum in my ears. I won't sign, I said. My voice surprised me with how steady it sounded. Not tonight. Not without an accountant I trust. Not without prayer. Something in Marcus's jaw tightened until it looked like it could crack. You're going to regret this. The bird in my chest beat harder, wings scraping bone. A wave of weakness moved through me from the crown of my head to my heels. My fingers tingled. I set my purse down and reached for the door latch. I need air, I whispered. Fine, he said, flicking the hazards on. Get some air. The night wrapped around me as I stepped out. The cicadas hummed. Somewhere far off, a siren wailed, then fell quiet. I leaned against the cool side of the car, pressing my cheek to the metal just for the relief of the temperature. The asphalt had that summer smell, oil and dust and something like rain that never came. I drew in a breath, slow as I could. From inside the car, their voices continued, sharp and fast. "She's doing this on purpose," Marcus said. "She's scared," Lila answered, but there wasn't softness in it. There was annoyance, like she had somewhere else to be, like this was taking too long. The world tilted a little. I slid my palm along the door to keep my balance. My heart fluttered again, then tripped. I've carried babies, lifted baskets of wet sheets heavier than a child, scrubbed floors on my knees, and I have never felt so small as I did in that moment, standing under a patchy streetlight, the glow flickering like a tired eye. I opened the back door and sat so I wouldn't fall. "I need to go home," I said. "I need to lie down." Marcus turned, tapping the wheel with 2 fingers, rapid, impatient. "We're not done." "We are for tonight," I said, closing my eyes for a second. "Please." He looked at Lila. Something passed between them. Agreement. Decision. Then the car door beside me clicked as he locked it. I blinked, confused. "Mama," Lila said, her voice suddenly bright, too bright. "You should rest. We'll swing around and get you once we sort something out at the shop. Fresh air will do you good. It's only a few minutes." Marcus nodded, already shifting the car out of park. "Stay right here," he said. "Don't go wandering." My mouth went dry. "You're leaving me?" "It's just for a bit," Lila said. "Don't be dramatic." The door closed. Their faces turned away. The engine growled, then the car pulled off, the red taillights shrinking until they were only 2 dim eyes in the distance, and then nothing. I sat on the edge of the seat, half in and half out of the car, the hazard lights ticking like a metronome for panic. I told myself they'd circle the block. I told myself they loved me even if we were all angry. Minutes stretched. The streetlight buzzed. A moth hit the bulb and fell, tiny and silent. I called Marcus. No answer. I called Lila. Straight to voicemail. The flutter in my chest settled into a heavy thud. I tried to stand and the world turned soft around the edges. I lowered myself to the curb, knees complaining, purse cradled in my lap. I could feel my pulse in my neck, jumping like something trying to escape. A car drove past slow, the driver looking over, then away. I was a shadow to them. A piece of the night that didn't concern them. I thought of my grandchildren's small hands, the way they used to pat my cheeks and say, "Grandma, wake up." I thought of Thomas and I whispered his name to the road. "Hold me," I said to the air. "Just a little." The damp worked through my skirt and into my bones. I'm not sure how long I sat there, listening to the city breathe around me. Time doesn't move the same when you realize you are truly alone. At some point the hazard lights stopped their ticking and the car went dark. I shifted, an ache rising from my lower back, and that was when I felt the edge of an envelope where it had slid inside my purse flap. The bank letter. I pulled it out and ran my thumb over my name, Etta Mae Coleman, typed clear as day. I didn't have the strength to open it then, but the weight of it steadied me. It reminded me that I still existed in places my children could not erase with a lock or a cruel word. My name had not left me. The night grew quieter, as if the city had turned its face to the pillow. I must have dozed or blacked out, I'm not sure which. When I felt hands on my shoulders, they were gentle, not my children's. A woman's voice said, "Ma'am? Are you all right?" Blue and red lights washed the street. The paramedic's face hovered into focus, soft with concern. I tried to speak and only a thin sound came out. "They left," I managed. "My children. They left." The paramedic squeezed my hand. "We've got you now." In the ambulance, I stared at the ceiling and let the siren carry me forward. The envelope lay on my chest, held in place by the blanket. I watched it rise and fall with my breath and made a quiet promise. If I ever stood up again, really stood, I would open that letter with steady hands. I would read every word. And I would not, under any circumstance, forget this night on Victory Drive. Because that was the moment the truth stepped into the light. My son and daughter had chosen themselves over me. They had left me in the dark to prove a point, to force my hand. They didn't know that life had a way of keeping receipts. They didn't know the power that still lived inside my name. I closed my eyes and let the motion of the ride rock me. Somewhere inside the hum of the ambulance, a calmer rhythm tapped, like a key sliding home in a lock. The door hadn't opened yet, but I could feel one waiting. When I woke in the hospital, the ceiling above me was a shade of pale I can't describe, somewhere between bone and paper. The hum of the fluorescent lights filled the silence, and the sheets smelled faintly of bleach. I turned my head, slow as a clock hand, hoping to see Marcus or Lila standing at my bedside. But there was no one. A nurse with kind eyes named Janice came by, checked my pulse and offered me water. I asked her if anyone had called. She looked down, shifted the chart in her hands and said, "No, ma'am. Not yet." The way she said it, soft, careful, told me she'd expected better too. Those first days blurred. Machines beeped steady, my body felt heavy, and loneliness pressed against my chest harder than the weakness in my heart. I watched other patients receive flowers, balloons, even just a visitor's smile. My phone sat silent on the tray, screen black as midnight. Not a single message from Marcus. Not a single word from Lila. By the time they discharged me, I walked slower, leaned heavier on my cane, but what hurt most wasn't my body. It was the hollowness where family should have been. I rode a cab back to my house. The magnolia tree in the front yard swayed gently as if to welcome me, but when I put my key to the office door the next morning, it wouldn't turn. They changed the locks. I stood there with my hand on the knob, heart beating like a drum in an empty room. People passing on the sidewalk must have seen the confusion on my face. To be locked out of my own business, the one Thomas and I built brick by brick, wasn't just cruel, it was a declaration. My children had erased me. Inside my house, bills had piled high on the table. Invoices, late notices, supplier demands. I sat down, the wood chair cool against my back, and pressed my hands together. "Lord," I whispered, "how did we get here?" That night I couldn't sleep. Memories tossed me around like a ship in a storm. I thought of Thomas's laughter, Marcus's first steps, Lila's school recitals. Had I raced them wrong? Had I given too much, made life too easy? My heart ached with the weight of questions I couldn't answer. The next morning I forced myself to tidy up. If nothing else, order gives a soul something to cling to. I reached for the old cedar chest in the corner of my bedroom. It held the things Thomas left behind, receipts, papers, letters. Most days I couldn't bear to open it, but something in me said, "Look." I lifted the lid and the smell of cedar drifted up, warm and sharp. Beneath folded shirts and a photo of us on River Street, I found a thick binder, leather worn smooth by time. On the front was embossed in gold, "Coastal First Bank." My hands trembled as I opened it. Tucked in the first sleeve was a letter dated just 2 months before Thomas passed. It was from the bank, confirming updates to our accounts. My eyes scanned the lines, heart pounding faster with every word. There it was in black and white, primary signatory, Mrs. Etta Mae Coleman. I blinked, read it again. And again. Not Marcus. Not Lila. Me. Not just on the business checking account, but on the escrow tied to the building's mortgage. Every major decision, every transfer, every dollar over a certain limit, required my hand. My signature. Mine alone. I sat back, binder heavy in my lap. 4 days I had felt like a ghost, pushed out of my own life, invisible to the very children I raised. And here in my hands was proof that I wasn't erased. Not yet. It felt almost supernatural, like Thomas had left me a key to a door I didn't know I'd need. He must have known, in that quiet way husbands sometimes do, that storms were coming. I closed the binder, laid my palm on top and whispered, "Thank you." Tears slid down my cheeks, not of sorrow but of something sharper, resolve. The world had tried to convince me I was finished, discarded. But this binder, this letter, said otherwise. That night, for the first time in weeks, I slept. The crickets sang outside my window, and in the rhythm of their chirping, I felt a promise settle deep inside me. They had left me for dead, but the ink of my name still held power. And soon they would learn just how much. The morning I carried that binder to the bank, the sun was already climbing high, and Savannah's air clung to me like a damp shawl. I pressed the binder tight against my chest as if it were a shield. Every step toward Coastal First Bank on Bull Street felt heavier than the one before, but there was also a strange steadiness in me, like the roots of the old oaks that lined the square. Inside, the bank smelled of polished wood and paper. Ceiling fans whirred slow overhead, stirring the faint scent of lemon oil. Folks were lined up at the counters, murmuring about deposits and loans, their voices a low hum. I walked straight past them to the office at the end of the hall, the one with a brass plate that read Carla Race, branch manager. Carla had known my husband, Thomas. She had shaken his hand a dozen times when we came in together to deposit earnings from the shop. She looked up from her desk as I knocked softly. Her eyes widened with recognition, then softened with a warmth I hadn't felt from anyone but Janice, that nurse in the hospital. "Mrs. Coleman," she said, standing. "It's been a while. Please sit." Her voice was kind but professional, steady as the tick of the clock on her wall. I lowered myself into the chair, the binder heavy on my lap, my cane resting against the arm. "I need clarity," I said, opening the binder. "This letter says I am the primary signatory. I need to know what that means today, not just when it was written." Carla slid the letter toward her, adjusted her glasses, and read. She nodded slowly, her expression firming with each line. Then she looked at me, her gaze direct, almost protective. "It means exactly what it says, Mrs. Coleman. These accounts, business checking, savings, escrow, cannot be moved, transferred, or touched without your signature. Not Marcus's. Not Lila's. Yours." For a moment, the words seemed to hang in the air like church bells. My heart beat louder, stronger, as if Thomas himself had whispered, "Stand tall," from the other side. Carla leaned forward. "Have your children been trying to access these accounts without you?" I lowered my eyes, ashamed though I had no reason to be. "They left me out, locked me out of the shop, told me I was old and in the way. I think they've been trying to take over." Carla's mouth tightened. "Well, they won't get far. The system flags every attempt, and without your hand on that paper, the bank will not move a cent. I'll make sure of it." Her assurance washed over me like cool water. I nodded, gripping the binder as if it were Thomas's hand itself. We spent the next hour reviewing details. Account balances, escrow agreements, standing orders. With each page, Carla explained, the fog of despair I'd been living in began to clear. Where I had seen weakness, I now saw leverage. Where I had felt erased, I saw my name written plainly, binding, undeniable. When I left the office, the streets of Bull Street felt brighter, sharper. The heat no longer pressed me down. It lifted me. I walked slower than I used to, yes, but I walked with purpose. At home that evening, I brewed tea and sat at the kitchen table with the binder open, pages spread like a map of my future. Marcus and Lila believed they had stripped me of power, but here it was, hidden in plain sight all along. My pen, not theirs, was the gatekeeper. I didn't call them. I didn't announce my discovery. I let the silence grow, let them believe they were in control. I knew soon enough the pressure of their own schemes would bring them back to me. And when that moment came, I would be ready. As the cicadas sang outside, I closed the binder and pressed it to my chest once more. A quiet fire burned in me. They had left me for dead. But the bank, the law, and fate itself had tied everything to my name. And I would not give it up lightly. It didn't take long before the cracks in Marcus and Lila's shiny plans began to show. Like linen pulled too tight on a line, their fabric started to tear. I heard about it first from Claudine, one of the seamstresses who'd worked at Coleman Coastal Linen since she was 17. She called me on a Tuesday afternoon, her voice trembling with worry. "Miss Etta," she said, still calling me the way she had when she was just a girl. "Marcus told us payday would be late. Said the bank was slow with the transfer. But that ain't never happened before, not once under you or Mr. Thomas. My stomach tightened. I could hear the buzz of the cicadas outside my window as she spoke, the sound like a warning. Don't you worry, child, I told her gently, though my own heart was uneasy. You'll get what's owed. Just give it time. But I knew what the problem was. I knew it the way a mother knows when her child is lying about cleaning his room. Marcus had gone to the bank, tried to withdraw, and hit the wall of my signature. By Thursday, the suppliers were calling me at home. Old Mr. Jenkins, who'd been delivering starch and soap powders to us for decades, left a message on my machine. Mrs. Coleman, I don't know what's happening, but the kids are behind on payments. I'm willing to wait a little for your sake. But not forever. The following week, a hotel manager I'd known for years stopped me in the aisle at the Piggly Wiggly. His face was red with irritation. Mrs. Coleman, I've always respected you. But your son promised a new delivery schedule and the linens haven't come. We've had to scramble. If this keeps up, we'll have to look elsewhere. I stood there with my basket of canned beans and flour, nodding politely, my cheeks hot with shame that wasn't mine to carry. I understand, I told him. I'll look into it. At night, lying in bed, I pictured Marcus pacing with his phone, angry at the bank. I pictured Lila, with her notebooks full of branding ideas, watching the numbers slip out of her hands. They must have thought the world would bend for them. But without that signature, my signature, they were grasping at air. One evening, I heard a knock at my door. It was Claudine again, this time with two of the other workers, Mabel and Jorge. They stood on my porch, their faces lined with worry. Miss Etta, Jorge said, his accent thick but his voice steady, we haven't been paid in 2 weeks. Marcus says it's paperwork trouble, but we think something's wrong. I invited them in, poured sweet tea into mismatched glasses and listened. My hands shook a little as I set the pitcher down. I didn't tell them everything. Not yet, but I promised them this. No matter what happens, I won't let you be forgotten. As the days rolled on, the stories piled up. Broken machines left unrepaired. Vendors refusing deliveries. Even whispers of investors backing out after Marcus and Lila failed to show them the funds they bragged about. I stayed quiet. I didn't run to confront them. Instead, I let the pressure build like steam in a pot. I knew sooner or later they'd come knocking. Not for love, not for reconciliation, but for the one thing they couldn't get without me. And I'll tell you this, waiting was hard. Harder than folding sheets with arthritic hands, harder than sitting through a sermon when your heart aches to shout. But patience is a weapon too. I sat at my kitchen table every evening with that binder open, reading and rereading the clauses. No disbursement without the personal, present signature of Mrs. Etta May Coleman. Those words were my armor. Marcus and Lila had thrown me away, treated me like yesterday's laundry. But now, the same system they dismissed me for not understanding was the very one holding them accountable. And while their world shook, I sat steady. Because sometimes, the sweetest justice is letting people trip over the very rope they tied for you. It was a Thursday morning when I got the call. The phone rang sharp, breaking the quiet of my kitchen where I sat with my coffee and the binder open as always. Ma, Marcus's voice came through, urgent but coated with a sweetness that didn't belong to him. We need to meet you at the bank. Just a formality. Could you come down today? Just a formality. That's how he said it, like I was an errand he needed to check off a list. For a moment I thought of refusing, letting him stew in his own mess. But something inside me, the same something that told me to look in that cedar chest, whispered, go. Let them see the truth with their own eyes. I dressed carefully, choosing my navy dress with the pearl buttons and the black shoes Thomas always said made me look dignified. I tied my scarf tight, picked up my cane and tucked the binder under my arm. Walking to the bus stop, I felt the weight of it like a steady heartbeat. When I stepped into Coastal First Bank on Bull Street, the air conditioning kissed my skin, cool against the Savannah heat. There they were, Marcus and Lila, waiting near the manager's office. Marcus wore a suit that didn't quite fit, shoulders too broad for the seams. Lila had a blazer draped over her dress, her hair tied in a bun so tight it pulled her brows upward. "Ma," she said, her voice pitched sweet like honey poured too thick. "We're so glad you came." I didn't answer. I just walked past them into Carla Reyes's office. Carla rose from her chair the moment she saw me, her face lighting up. "Mrs. Coleman," she said warmly, "thank you for coming." She gestured for me to sit. Marcus and Lila followed, their smiles stiff as starch. Marcus leaned on the desk, trying to project confidence. "We just need a quick signature, Mama. The investors are waiting. It'll secure everything." Carla adjusted her glasses, cleared her throat, and looked directly at me. "Before we proceed," she said, "I think it's best we review the terms of these accounts." Marcus waved a hand. "That's not necessary." "It is," I interrupted. My voice didn't shake. It carried the calm of someone who already knows how the story ends. "Read it out loud, Carla." "Every word." So she did. Her voice filled the room, smooth and clear. "Authorized disbursement requires the personal present signature of Mrs. Etta Mae Coleman. No exceptions." The silence that followed was thick, almost holy. I watched Marcus's jaw clench, his lips pressing into a thin line. Lila's eyes flicked to mine, wide and desperate, before darting down to the floor. Carla continued, turning the binder toward them. "Without Mrs. Coleman here in person with her signature, no money can be withdrawn, no property can be transferred, no investor can be paid. This has been the policy since her late husband designated her primary signatory. And it remains binding." The color drained from Marcus's face. He tried to laugh, but it came out hollow. Surely there's a workaround? A power of attorney, maybe?" Carla shook her head firmly. "Not unless Mrs. Coleman authorizes it. And she hasn't." I leaned forward, resting my hands on the binder. My rings glinted under the office light, the same rings I'd worn when I washed linens by hand in our early days. "You thought I was powerless," I said softly. "You left me on the side of the road like garbage. But here we are. And look who holds the pen." Marcus opened his mouth to argue, but no words came. His eyes darted to Lila, but she wouldn't look at him. Her face had gone pale, her shoulders slumped. I sat back, the cane steady in my hand. "I will not sign away my husband's legacy. Not today, not ever. This business was built on sweat and faith, not greed. If you want to see it survive, you'll respect that. If not, you'll watch it slip away." The room was so still I could hear the faint hum of the ceiling fan above us. Carla closed the binder gently and slid it back to me. "Mrs. Coleman's decision is final," she said, her voice like a gavel. I stood slow but tall. For the first time in weeks, maybe months, I felt my back straighten, my chest rise. Marcus and Lila stayed seated, their eyes fixed on the floor as if the ground might offer them a way out. Walking out of that bank, the Savannah sun met me like an old friend. My cane tapped against the sidewalk, steady, sure. And with every step I knew, the power they tried to strip from me had never left. It had only been waiting, patient, for the right moment to be revealed. They thought I was finished. But they had just learned the truth. Without me, without my name, without my hand, they had nothing. And for the first time since that night on Victory Drive, I felt alive again. The morning after that meeting at Coastal First Bank, my phone started ringing like a church bell at Easter. I let it ring. I knew whose voices were waiting on the other end, and I wanted them to sit with their own silence a while longer. By noon I gave in and picked up. "Ma," Marcus's voice spilled out, cracked and frantic. "You don't understand what you've done. We've got suppliers waiting, investors breathing down our necks. You're going to ruin everything if you don't just sign." I pressed the receiver close and let his words hang, heavy and desperate. "Everything was already ruined, Marcus," I said quietly. "And not by me." Then I hung up. The calls kept coming, sometimes from Lila, sometimes from unknown numbers I knew were their business partners. Each message carried the same mix of anger and pleading. Lila's were softer, but not softer in the way a daughter ought to be. more like a child begging for a toy she thought she deserved. "Mama," she whispered one evening in a voicemail, "please. The investors are threatening to walk. The staff's angry. We can fix this but not without you. Just come by and sign." But every word rang false. These weren't apologies. They were bargaining chips thrown on a table they no longer owned. That week I walked to the shop myself. The sign above the door still read Coleman Coastal Linen, but one of the letters had slipped, hanging by a nail. The air smelled stale, not fresh like it used to when I ran the presses and scrubbers. Inside, the machines groaned louder than I remembered, a sound of neglect. Claudine was there, folding towels with her head bowed. She looked up, her face tired. "Miss Etta," she said, "they don't know what they're doing. Half the orders are late. The hotel down on Broughton canceled their contract. We're all scared we'll be out of work." I walked slowly across that floor, the same floor Thomas and I had mopped after long nights, and I laid my hand on the warm metal of one of the washers. "Hold on," I told her. "Just hold on a little longer." Meanwhile, Marcus and Lila were scrambling like children chasing a kite in the wind. Word spread through Savannah quicker than a summer storm. Folks whispered about bounced checks, angry suppliers, and canceled contracts. Their rebrand had already been announced with flair, but now the investors were demanding proof of funds. And every path led back to one locked door: my signature. Then came the bold move. Marcus showed up on my porch, face red, tie loosened, and waved a folded paper in my face. "This is a power of attorney," he said, his voice quivering with both fury and fear. "We had it drawn up. The bank has to honor it." I looked him square in the eye, then reached out with 2 fingers, tapping the folded page back against his chest. "The bank already saw that nonsense," I told him. "They laughed it right back across the desk." He sputtered, cursed under his breath, then stormed down my steps. I watched him drive off, tires screeching, and I whispered, "The louder the storm, the quicker it blows over." 2 nights later, Lila came instead. She didn't knock loud, just stood there on my porch, clutching her sweater like a girl afraid of the dark. Her voice trembled. "Mama, please. We're drowning. Just sign enough to cover payroll. Just that." I studied her face, the same face I had kissed as a baby, soothed as a child. I thought of how she had looked away on Victory Drive when Marcus pulled off. That memory burned hotter than any plea. "You left me to die," I said evenly. "Do you think ink on paper erases that?" Tears welled in her eyes, but she didn't argue. She turned and left, the boards of my porch creaking under her steps, then fell silent again. Inside, I sat at my kitchen table with the binder before me, the pages spread wide. The words that once seemed like dry legal jargon now felt like scripture. No disbursement without the personal, present signature of Mrs. Etta Mae Coleman. The power wasn't in money. It wasn't in titles or in flashy investor promises. It was in the quiet weight of a mother's name, the ink of her dignity, the legacy her husband had trusted her to guard. And as Marcus and Lila scrambled, lied, begged, and raged, I sat steady. Because I had already survived the worst thing children can do to a parent. They left me for dead. Nothing they did now could undo that. They thought desperation might break me. But all it did was remind me, I was the only one who still held the pen. The calls slowed after that week. Not because Marcus and Lila had suddenly found peace, but because the pressure finally wrapped itself around their throats. When anger and begging don't work, silence becomes its own admission of defeat. I heard through Claudine that 2 of our oldest hotel contracts had walked away, choosing another linen supplier in town. Vendors stopped extending credit. Payroll had to be delayed again. And investors, the ones Marcus and Lila bragged about, pulled out entirely once they realized there was no money to back the promises. It should have broken me hearing the legacy Thomas and I built crumbling under their hands. But instead I felt something I hadn't in weeks. Calm. Because chaos has a way of settling once the truth is undeniable. I didn't wait for them to come crawling again. I put on my Sunday hat, picked up my cane, and walked straight back into that shop on Bay Street as if I had never left. The workers looked up when the bell over the door chimed. For a moment the air stilled. Then Claudine rushed forward and hugged me so tight I thought my ribs would crack. "Miss Etta," she whispered, "thank God you're here." I patted her arm and smiled. "Don't thank me yet, child. We've got work to do." That day I called a meeting right there on the folding floor. The hum of the machines filled the background as I stood tall with my cane in one hand and the binder in the other. "Marcus and Lila may have locked me out of this building," I said, "but they didn't lock me out of my name. And they didn't lock me out of the bank. From this day forward, payroll comes from me. Supplies are paid through me. If a client has a complaint, they talk to me. This shop is back in the hands of the woman who built it." The relief on those faces, Claudine, Mabel, Jorge, and the rest, was worth more than any investor's promise. They clapped, not loud and forced, but soft and real, like people exhaling after holding their breath too long. Over the next weeks, I put boundaries in place. Marcus and Lila were barred from the accounts. Carla at the bank made sure of that. I rehired 2 loyal maintenance men who had been dismissed when my children thought repairs were too expensive. They brought the washers back to life, one by one, their steady clangs sounding like music. I set a modest stipend for myself, just enough to keep my lights on and groceries stocked, and every other dollar went towards stabilizing the business. The bills stopped piling. Vendors began to trust us again slowly because my name on a check still meant something. Did Marcus and Lila fight? Of course. Marcus tried showing up one morning, demanding answers, shouting that I was stealing what belonged to him. I looked him straight in the eye and said, "A son who leaves his mother to die owns nothing from her hand." Then I turned my back and let Claudine escort him out. Lila tried a different tactic. She came quietly one evening, slipping into my kitchen while I stirred collard greens on the stove. "Mama," she whispered, "can't we just start over? Family is family." I stirred the pot, the steam rising between us, and answered without looking at her. "Family is sacred, but trust is earned. You shattered both. I'll feed you if you're hungry. I'll pray for you if you're lost. But you will not put your hands on what you tried to bury me for. That season is finished." She didn't argue. She just lowered her head, mumbled something I couldn't hear, and slipped out the door. Boundaries. That's what I'd learned in those quiet nights alone. Boundaries with teeth. Because forgiveness without change is just permission for more betrayal. Slowly the shop found its rhythm again. Fresh linens folded crisp, deliveries went out on time, and the old clients returned with cautious smiles. The business was no longer the empire Marcus dreamed of, nor the rebrand Lila scribbled in her notebooks. It was steady, honest, and alive. Me. I had found a new kind of peace. Not the fragile peace of pretending problems don't exist, but the strong peace of knowing I had faced betrayal, survived it, and reclaimed what mattered. Marcus and Lila still circled, angry and desperate, but they circled on the outside. They could scream, they could cry, they could curse my name, but the locks, the bank, and the binder all answered to me. And that was enough. The weeks turned into months, and Savannah's seasons shifted the way they always do, slow, steady, and stubborn as the tide. The moss on the oaks thickened, the air cooled just enough for me to sit longer on my porch, and the shop found its heartbeat again. Not loud, not flashy, but steady. Just the way Thomas and I had always run it. Marcus and Lila never came back to work. They circled from a distance, sometimes calling, sometimes sending letters that smelled of desperation. The words were always the same. "Mama, if you just sign this one thing. Mama, if you just give us another chance. Mama, think of the family." But I had learned the hard way that family isn't proven by blood alone. Family is proven by how you treat each other when times turn dark. And when I lay on that curb on Victory Drive, they showed me what I meant to them. That memory was carved into me like initials on bark. It would not fade. So I built my peace without them. With the accounts firmly under my name, I chose dignity over revenge. I directed part of the profits into a scholarship fund in Thomas's memory for local youth who wanted to learn a trade. I made sure every employee was not just paid on time but respected as family, because they were the ones who stood with me when my own blood turned away. I didn't squander the money on comfort or revenge trips. Though I invested it in stability. A new washer here, a repaired dryer there. Fresh coats of paint on the walls. And little by little, Coleman Coastal Linen became not a kingdom for Marcus and Lila to inherit, but a home for loyalty to live. One Sunday afternoon, as the church bells chimed across town, I sat on my porch with my tea. The scholarship committee had just sent me a letter. 2 young women would be the first to receive funds in Thomas's name. Reading their words of gratitude filled me in a way Marcus and Lila's apologies never could. And it was then I realized, I wasn't just holding on to the past. I was planting something new. People ask me if I ever forgave my children. Forgiveness is complicated. I pray for them. I hope one day they will wake up and see the truth. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean giving them the keys to the house they tried to burn down. It means I release the weight from my own shoulders and let them carry what they created. Do I miss the children I once knew? The little boy with skin knees, the little girl who clutched my hand at school plays? Every day. But those children are gone, replaced by adults who chose greed over love. That grief will always live in me. So I've made peace with it. Because when they left me for dead, life handed me a reminder. My name still carried power. My signature still meant something. And with it, I chose not bitterness but dignity. Now when I walk through the shop, cane tapping steady against the floor, the workers look up and smile. Not out of fear, not out of obligation, but out of respect. And I smile back because I know this legacy stands. So if you take anything from my story, let it be this. Betrayal may break your heart, but it does not have to break your spirit. The very things others use to discard you may be the same things that save you. My children left me for dead. But I became the only signature their bank would accept. And with that pen I wrote my own ending. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.